Hi, it's Paul from Wicked Acorn. We're on another adventure to see what we can learn about Manchester. Greater Manchester, actually. Today we're in Sale, and in a few minutes we'll be heading over to Altrincham. I'm revisiting something I found about 4 years ago, and I hadn't thought of it until I started preparing this video. This story is about a man who went from being worth £14 million, now that's 1918 pounds, to owning just over £500,000 when he died. As the saying goes, shrouds don't have pockets. You can't take it with you. He didn't lose it. He didn't squander it. He made the world a better place with it. This is the story of John Leigh. This is the site of the former John Leigh War Memorial Hospital. There's not much left to see of it anymore. Sale and Brooklyn's War Memorial Hospital, originally John Leigh War Memorial Hospital, opened in 1921 and closed sometime in the early 90s. It was demolished a few years later, and flats were built on the site. They saved the sign over the door and built it into the wall here. By the time war broke out in 1914, John Leigh was 30, a well-respected businessman working in the cotton waste industry. As seriously injured servicemen returned home from the battlefields and the ravages of war became more evident, John and his wife decided to do what they could to relieve the suffering they witnessed. They purchased Townfield House in Altrincham with the intention to fix it up to accommodate 100 wounded officers and to lend it to the Red Cross for the duration of the war. It was opened on the 28th of April 1917. Afterwards, the idea was for it to be used by disabled soldiers. Now, this wasn't one of those Downton Abbey hospitals where they just provided a place for the soldiers to sleep while they recovered. This was a state-of-the-art facility. The hospital contained 3 floors with an electric lift, 10 wards and a spacious recreation room, including separate accommodations for the staff. The grounds were also specially laid out to include a large vegetable garden, which helped supply the hospital. Apart from the government allowance for patients' maintenance, the hospital was entirely funded by John Leigh. When it was no longer required by the Red Cross Society, it was to continue as a home for disabled sailors and soldiers at John Leigh's expense. John Leigh continued to finance the maintenance costs, which included the purchase of 5 ambulances and their ongoing running expenses. Later, John Leigh donated his father's former home, Woodbourne, here in Brooklands, together with 8 acres of land. Samuel Brooks, who we've talked about before on this channel, the namesake of Brooklands, built 4 large detached houses in 1861 on the new Brooklands Road, one called Fernacre, another Merseylee, Belmore, which is the only one which remains today, and finally Woodbourne. I presume this is the house in question. The original brochure held by Trafford Studies clearly calls it John Leigh Memorial Hospital, Woodbourne, Brooklands. But here we have Lyndon Leigh Auxiliary Military Hospital, Brooklands, Cheshire. This photo is labeled the opening of Lyndon Leigh Red Cross Hospital, Brooklands Road, by the Duke of Connaught, and that, most definitely, is John Leigh. Lyndon Leigh was apparently opposite to Woodbourne. The names of these buildings and associated photos are a bit mixed up, I think, and it may be something for someone to investigate. But suffice it to say, John Leigh had a hand in them and was quite free with his money to help in this cause. He financed the conversion and fitting out and maintenance of what came to be known as the John Leigh Memorial Hospital. Records show it as opening in 1921 as the John Leigh Memorial Hospital, and later changing its name to the Sale and Brooklands War Memorial Hospital in 1928. Some people have referred to it as the Sale Cottage Hospital, but again, the records are confusing. I'll leave it to someone else to try and set the record straight. Leave a comment if you have any insight into this. At any rate, one of the hospitals he financed, supposedly this one, was specifically designed and equipped to help servicemen returning from battle who were suffering from neurasthenia. This was more commonly known as shell shock, but doctors used the term neurasthenia to avoid the stigma that was attached to shell shock, as many thought them to be malingerers and cowards. Of course, today it would be called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The only similar hospital in the country at the time was in Golders Green, London. John Leigh intended to offer Altrincham Council money to purchase the derelict Oldfield Hall estate from the Countess of Stamford, The large area of land adjacent to Townfield House was to provide a recreational facility for the occupants of the John Leigh Hospital. The land cost £7,000 and spread over 12 acres. It was hotly debated in the local press at the time because it was desired by the council for returning soldiers as a home for heroes. The Countess of Stamford said it had always been the desire of the late Lord Stamford that his Oldfield estate become the property of Altrincham, to be maintained as a park. She wanted Altrincham to benefit from John Leigh's generous offer, so instead a gift of equal value from the Earl of Stamford's estate would take the form of land for workmen's dwellings, equal in value to the Oldfield estate. The estate was considered to be one of the most beautiful private parks in Cheshire. The land given by the now Earl of Stamford on the occasion of his coming of age would be laid out in Garden City lines. 400 houses for working people were added in the 1920s. This area is what we now know as the Oldfield Brow Estate. The council were delighted to accept John Leigh's offer, and his donation came with no condition other than that the land be known as Leigh Park in the memory of his father, and kept as an open space forever. The park is now in the care of the Friends of John Leigh. Instead of providing his employees with free cups to pee in December 1917 he gave a 20% bonus on a year's wages to all the employees of John Leigh Limited, so they could invest in war bonds and to meet the increased cost of living. John was made a baronet in 1918, becoming Sir John Leigh of Altrincham. Leigh was rewarded for war service and contributing to all war charities, including a very large sum to the Ministry of Pensions, which provided for institutional treatment for disabled soldiers. He also donated to the King's Fund for disabled soldiers, gifting £50,000. It was estimated in 1918 alone, his donations to the war effort amounted to over £300,000. His generous financial gifts and personal involvement, together with his wife, provided numerous servicemen the best available care, support, and comfort they justifiably deserved as a result of their service to the nation. John was elected as a Member of Parliament in 1922. He held the seat until he retired from politics in 1945. In 1930, he gave a generous donation of £10,000 to provide work for hundreds of unemployed textile workers. The gift was in response to those affected by continued trade depression. John Leigh died the 28th of July, 1959. On his death, Sir John's estate was valued at £590,985, 1 shilling and 8 pence. A very tidy sum. But he had used the overwhelming majority of his money to make life better for his fellow man. Alright, I admit it, the thumbnail's clickbait, but in fairness, this video is not about how to become a billionaire. It's about how to be one.